Welcome to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast, a production of SMI, the Spring Manufacturers Institute. I'm your host, Gary McCoy, Executive Director of SMI. In this edition, we'll talk with Allison Grealis of the Women in Manufacturing Association about how the manufacturing industry has changed for women over the past couple of decades. In our second segment, we'll chat with Micki Vandeloo of Lakeview Consulting about grant money available to manufacturers. The Springs Are Everywhere podcast is sponsored in part by our platinum sponsor, Gibbs Interwire. It's my pleasure to welcome Allison Grealis to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. Allison is the founder and president of the Women in Manufacturing Association. It's a national trade association focused on supporting, promoting, and inspiring women in the manufacturing sector. Allison is the host of her own podcast, Hear Her Story. It's a monthly podcast which celebrates the stories of women in manufacturing careers. Allison, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Allison, tell me how the Women in Manufacturing Association got its start.
Yeah, so I've been working with trade associations for about 23 years, and I started my trade association career working with the Precision Metal Forming Association, PMA. And while working at that association, we had a growing number of female members who were looking for ways to connect and share resources and support with one another. So with the leadership of our first female chair, Gretchen Zierich, we started to hold women in metal forming programs, which allowed women to make connections and to share advice and support. And from there, as staff of the association started to look for external resources, surprisingly, I found that there were no external other organizations started to create resources for women in industry. So we decided that why not create our own resources and create our own community for women in a larger space beyond just metal forming. So we started first with a conference called our Summit, and then eventually transitioned into a full service trade association. And next year we celebrate our 15th anniversary as an organization.
And speaking of 15 years, how has the industry changed in terms of its acceptance of women into the industry?
I definitely think there's been huge improvement. In the 20 years I've been working in the manufacturing space, I feel like there's definitely a greater spirit of inclusion that we see in manufacturing. I think obviously companies look a lot different than they did 20 years ago. We see more women selecting careers in manufacturing, which is great. We also see more women and diverse people who are filling all types of roles in manufacturing. So I definitely think there's an increased level of inclusivity. I think as well, we see, cultures changing in manufacturing. And obviously, pandemic played a big piece of that, as we know that helps companies transition to be more flexible and more inclusive places to work.
Allison, what are some ideas, on a practical side to encourage women to join the manufacturing industry and likewise to support those women who are already in the field?
Yeah, so we often say you can't be what you can't see. So we encourage companies to share kind of what does modern manufacturing looks like, or what does it look like? So we know that, people aren't necessarily seeing what kind of the landscape of manufacturing is present day. So we encourage organizations and companies to promote what it is that they're making and doing. And obviously using vehicles where current generations of the workforce are is a good thing. So, leveraging and tapping into social channels such as Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, finding social vehicles are a great way to share stories of maybe what a day in the life looks like for an employee or what are those types of things that you're making and doing at your organization. So promotion is really big. And then as well, sharing stories of people at your organization. So people like to see themselves in others, and that's often what inspires them to join an organization or company. So highlighting diverse individuals at your companies, including females, is a great thing for them to be able to emulate maybe what is that future position someone else aspires to do and or fill. So we often do a lot of that ourselves. So we're trying to promote year round what modern manufacturing looks like as well. We try to promote modern stories of women in industry. And we do that through social channels, through our Hear Her Story podcast and blog series, But we also highly encourage companies to do this too. And we're seeing some great success stories with companies, manufacturers leveraging on channels, the reach that they can have to current generations in the workforce and people looking to get into the workforce.
Allison, I think the image of manufacturing has improved a lot, which has helped. It's a dark, dirty, dangerous place. What have you seen in that regard in terms of the image changing?
Yeah, our goal again is to promote modern manufacturing, so not to focus on those archaic 3Ds of what we're often connected to manufacturing, but alternatively to promote the modernity of what modern manufacturing looks like. So the technology, the innovation that's really being leveraged at manufacturing companies, we try to promote that. And as well, the changing positions. So we know that with technology and innovation and smart manufacturing, the positions that were being posted and or filled 20 years ago look very different present day. And so try to promote what that type of use of technology and innovation is in manufacturing. And then as well, the types of roles and responsibilities that people could hold that are much different than those that were from many years ago.
Allison, what challenges do women in manufacturing face?
One of the challenges, which is why we first got started, was that still present day, a lot of women feel isolated and alone in this industry. We're still in a very male-dominated space. Men still make up the majority of the manufacturing workforce at about 70%. And so we know, especially for small to mid-sized companies and maybe more rural or remote areas, women could be the only female at their organization or company, or one of just a handful or a few. So we try to be that network externally for women to tap into so they don't feel like they're isolated and alone. So that is one of the challenges that we still see present day. Obviously, increasing numbers of women in manufacturing will combat that, or at least improve that isolation feeling, or that feeling that women feel that they're just a few or just one within an organization. Another challenge definitely has been, inclusivity. So companies have, I think, made great strides in being more inclusive organizations and creating policies that better retain women in manufacturing, and really not even just women, but generally the workforce. We know that flexibility is something that most employees are seeking. So companies have gotten really creative in manufacturing as to how to offer flexibility for all people in manufacturing, as well as for those on the front line even. So I think that has been a challenge for manufacturers and generally for women, who we know a large percentage of them do take a step out sometimes within their career, or they pivot to want to have families and to be parents. So that is something that, we work very closely with manufacturers about, to talk about how do we infuse flexibility into the workforce.
Allison, how can the manufacturing industry celebrate women who are pursuing these types of careers?
Yeah, I think celebration is really, it can mean lots of different things, but I think one of the ways that we see most successful really is in that storytelling. So sharing those stories of successful women. We know some manufacturers have started town halls with their female talent and female leaders, and it's been very impactful. So they've done, one organization we work with, they do a My Story, My Way series, and they have senior leaders at that organization hold town halls, both live and virtual, again, to be accessible to all people, not just at that facility, and or people able to leave the machine or the operation to which they're leading. But broadcasting that story of how a person rose and led can be very inspirational and also provide support for those who maybe want to have a similar career pathway. So I think that is something that companies can obviously do to do that storytelling. Recognition is obviously a big piece as well. So, we encourage companies to recognize their female talents. They're doing outstanding work. We ourselves have a Hall of Fame that this year we celebrate a new class of inductees in conjunction with our summit in October in Boston. So 10 new women will be inducted. So that's a way to celebrate those outstanding and legacy leading women in industry. So that is huge as well. And then ERG groups are a great vehicle year round to support women in industry. So employee resource groups or affinity groups, most of the companies that we work with who are outstanding places to work for women have those affinity groups or those ERG groups to year round provide an internal support network for their female employees.
Wow, a lot of great stuff. And you mentioned you do some media stuff, social media, podcasts. What are some of the things you guys are involved in that capacity?
So we hope to be a storytelling agent for companies and for the industry. So a lot of the things that we do include, blog series. We've done a blog series since 2012 called Hear Her Story. We then brought that live into our podcast setting. So that is to complement what we're already doing and sharing stories year round. We as well celebrate company accomplishments and some of the great work that they're doing as it relates to the attraction and retention and advancement of women. And then as well, through social channels, we try to promote opportunities for women within industry, whether it be training courses or educational opportunities. We have some formal leadership programs for shop floor, early career managers, and executive level women. So we promote information about those so companies can support their women participating. And then as well, we try to share best practices. So that is one of the key things that we try to help companies with. We have, close to 3,500 unique manufacturing companies that we work with. So trying to share what are those best practices that these companies are deploying so that other companies don't have to recreate the wheel. So that is one of the key things that we also do through social channels and through some of our storytelling.
Allison, thanks so much for your time today. How can people get in touch with you and with the Women in Manufacturing Association?
So we have a vibrant, as I said, social presence, but our website's a great place to check us out, womeninmanufacturing.org, if you've not been there. And then, I and our organization is very active on LinkedIn is probably our primary place that we share information. So we have a group that organizations and people can follow. I think presently we have more than 33,000 followers with us on LinkedIn. So that's a great place where both us and our local chapters, to which we have 33 around the country, are sharing information and resources. So check us out online, and we would love to work with you or your organization.
Allison, thank you so much. I'm inspired that you're out there promoting women in manufacturing. It's a cause at the Spring Manufacturers Institute that we're trying to take up as well. So thanks for being out there as inspiring others to follow your example. So have a great day. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Gibbs Interwire is proud to be a Platinum Room sponsor for the SMI Educational Symposium at Spring World 2024. Be sure to visit us at booth number 1115. As a longtime supporter of SMI's mission to inform the spring industry, Gibbs Interwire is proud to be the platinum sponsor of the new Springs Are Everywhere podcast. For over 6 decades, Gibbs Interwire has provided high-quality spring wire and strip products in carbon, nickel, red metals, and stainless steel alloys, along with specialty items such as shaped wire, strand, cable, brush, and staple wire. With many locations throughout North America, our experienced team is available when and where you need us. Gibbs Interwire offers exceptional value to our customers by providing a vast inventory from the best suppliers worldwide. Gibbs Interwire is a partner of L. Jaloy Specialty Metals and a combined metals company. For your quote today, call Gibbs Interwire at 800-800-4422 or give us a visit at gibbswire.com.
It's my pleasure to welcome Micki Vandeloo to the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. Micki is the president of Lakeview Consulting, a team of 5 experienced grant professionals who have collectively obtained more than $150 million in grant funding to clients in the manufacturing and trade association communities. Micki has more than 15 years' experience performing grant consulting services for clients in the manufacturing space. And I'm happy to report that Micki will be joining SMI at our educational symposium in October at Spring World 2024 in Rosemont, Illinois, just close to Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Her topic is manufacturing money available to spring makers. Micki, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. I really, really appreciate it.
So, Micki, let's just start off. Give me a little preview of what you're going to be talking about at Spring World.
Sure. So the purpose of my presentation is really to educate manufacturers, because I find that a lot of manufacturers don't know a lot about the grants available to them and don't know how to find them and are pretty overwhelmed by the process. So the goal of my presentation is really to educate manufacturers so they don't feel that overwhelmed. So what we'll be covering are the why, the what, and the how of manufacturing grants. We're going to be talking about why manufacturers would want grant funding, and why funders want to fund manufacturing efforts. We're going to talk about how, a proven process for finding and getting grants, and what type of grants manufacturers can apply for, and what sources of funding are out there for them. So it's a really educational piece. And I can also tell you that I leave a lot of time for questions, and I get a lot of questions, which I'm highly encouraging for my audience, because everybody's got their own issues and their own perception of grants. And I like to just dispel the myths and hopefully get them a little more comfortable.
Well, great. So, Micki, maybe what are some practical ideas that can help manufacturers tap into these funding opportunities?
Right. So, Gary, what I tell a lot of manufacturers is the first step toward getting any funding is to define your project, define what you're going to do. So let's say, for example, a spring maker wants to invest in new equipment or more modern equipment, and they want to invest in that equipment, train their people, maybe put in new software to run the equipment, maybe get engineering help in making sure that equipment is appropriate for their floor. What I tell clients is the better you can define that project, exactly who's going to be doing the work, what work they're going to be doing, and what are going to be the outcomes, the more likely you are going to be to find a grant that funds those outcomes. And by the way, for a project like that, there might be 3 or 4 different grants. There might be a grant to fund the equipment installation or part of the equipment. There might be a grant to fund the training. There might be a grant to fund the outside engineering expertise. So it might be parsed into different parts of that project might be parsed out to apply for that grant, those grants. But that's the very first step. That's, I tell clients, let's talk about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and what's going to be the outcome, what's the budget, that type of thing. Once they've done that, then we or they can go and search for grants to support what they're going to be doing.
And those aren't just for equipment, but it could be for workforce type things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Almost every state has workforce development or training funding. Some states have recycling grants. Missouri actually has a very strong recycling equipment grant program. Some have equipment grants. So the state of Indiana, for example, has a manufacturing modernization fund that funds up to $250,000 for more Industry 4.0 or more automation type projects. More and more states are funding that. So there's grants out there to fund a lot of different types of activities. But again, defining those activities up front is what we want to do.
Micki, what are some stumbling blocks that manufacturers should be aware of?
Yeah. So one huge one is that you can't do the work proposed under a grant until after the grant is approved. So a lot of times that will delay the start of a project. And so what I find with manufacturers is if they wait too long and they're right on the cusp of doing their project, a grant isn't a great fit because they're going to have to wait to do it. So I like to talk to clients way ahead, preferably 6 to 8 months before they're going to do their big projects. The other stumbling block is that if a manufacturer goes and tries to apply for a grant themselves, sometimes they don't pay a lot of attention to the gory details that are in the funding opportunity. And so things like font and things like page limit are more important than a lot of people think, because if you are a reviewer of a grant, or if you're offering a grant and you've got 50 applicants and you're looking through 50 applications and somebody doesn't follow those basic, requirements, that's a reason for them to throw out the grant application. So they won't get the grant then just because they didn't use the right font. And so that doesn't click with a lot of manufacturers. That doesn't fit in with their logical mind. And I was in manufacturing for 25 years. I mean, most manufacturers have very logical minds and they think, well, what difference does that make? But it's just a reason for somebody to decline an application.
Micki, do you have any recent success stories that you'd like to share with us?
I love doing what I do because the results are very palpable, right? So basically, I would say almost a year ago, I helped a manufacturer out in California get $8 million to renovate an old facility. California has a lot of unique grant opportunities in the state, and this one was for zero emissions vehicle manufacturing. And this company made huge forklifts, the forklifts that lift up boats. And they had a zero emissions line, and they needed new equipment and they needed upgraded facilities. So they got money from the state for a little over $8 million. During COVID, I got a Kansas manufacturer a little over $3 million, or we did, for a bottling. They were a sanitation or sanitary products manufacturer. And so they had like soap bottles and stuff. So they brought a bottling process in-house, and it was previously purchased overseas. And so during COVID, they weren't getting the bottles. So they needed to have equipment to do that. More recently, we helped a large client of ours get about $800,000 from the state of Texas to fund a work-based learning program. So there's a lot of successes, I'm happy to say. And, I love talking about them, that's for sure.
So, Micki, I understand you wrote a book called The For-Profit Grant Writing Book. And tell me a little bit about the content of that.
Right. That book was meant to be, again, kind of an education piece, a little bit more fun one, but an education piece for manufacturers. It's not ever going to make me a bestseller, by the way. It's something that I give to clients and just more giveaway than anything. But this book is a case study, basically, of a fictional manufacturing company that is expanding and is looking to get grants to fund part of that expansion. So it walks through what that company does to get the grants. And it's a pretty short book. It's an easy read. It's a lot of clients have complimented me on it because it makes the process a little bit more clear to them.
Okay. So just really helps them understand
visualize.
This is where you're going. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Well, good. Right. Well, you said you've been in manufacturing for 25 plus years, and our other guest on the podcast, Allison Grealis, talked about women in manufacturing. So I thought I'd just ask you, from your perspective, what challenges to women in manufacturing have you seen that they're facing?
Right. Well, when I worked in manufacturing 25 years ago, and I think it's different now, but I don't think it's a whole lot different. I think women have a hard time being seen in manufacturing. Most of the time, we're not the most aggressive ones in the room. So, we don't force ourselves into a conversation. But when I think of like the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, I mean, that really spoke to me because you really have to make yourself known in the room. You have to try a little bit harder, I think, sometimes to make yourself known in the room. I also think that there was, at least when I was in the industry, there were biases toward women that, maybe you were, instead of being the engineer like I was, I have an industrial engineering degree and a master's in business administration. I was more qualified than many of the men in the room that were talking to me. But still, there was this recognition that I wasn't like them, and so maybe I was more the secretary and the person that should be taking notes. And I actually had that happen with a company that we were meeting with when I was working in the automotive industry, and he just assumed that I was the secretary.
Wow.
Fortunately, my boss, who was the general manager of the company, stepped in and said, "Oh no, she's the engineer that's going to be making sure that the product from your facility transfers to ours without interruption to the customer's production." So yeah, it was, I think it's difficult. I think there are many more, and Allison's group has done a wonderful job of raising the conversation, raising the recognition of women in the industry. I totally commend them. I know it's an uphill battle. I really do. It's, and there's still not as many women as I'd like to see. There are more, but there's not as many as I'd like to see in manufacturing. That's for sure.
Well, I'm glad you're part of this, and we can celebrate with you. And
absolutely,
Micki, how would folks reach you if they wanted to contact you?
Sure. Well, I've got a lot of really great resources, free resources, articles, newsletters on my website. And there's also a contact form on my website. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. My email directly is micki@lakeviewconsulting.net, but my website really has a lot of information that manufacturers should see. There's also a free manufacturing grant database on there that companies can sign up for and see what's out there, just to see what's out there for free. So happy to share that. That's www.lakeviewconsulting.net.
Micki, thanks so much, and we are certainly looking forward to having you at our event coming up not that far away in October.
No, certainly not. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
In addition to Gibbs Interwire, the Springs Are Everywhere podcast has been made possible by the generous support of our silver sponsor, Automated Industrial Motion. You can learn more at aimcoil.com.
Thanks for joining us for the Springs Are Everywhere podcast. I want to thank our two guests today, Allison Grealis and Micki Vandeloo. You can learn more about SMI at smihq.org. Be sure to subscribe, rate us, and like us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. I want to thank our platinum sponsor, Gibbs Interwire, and our silver sponsor, Automated Industrial Motion, for making this program possible.
Here's a final thought. If you had toast for breakfast, you may have been using a torsion spring. Torsion springs are commonly found in pop-up toasters, assisting in the release and controlled popping up of your toast when it's finished toasting. Remember, springs are everywhere, and maybe even closer than you thought.